Welcome, welcome, traveler. You have arrived at the right moment. The day is done. Whatever it held, whatever weight it placed upon your shoulders, whatever noise it pressed against your ears, all of it can be set down now. Gently. Like a heavy satchel lowered to soft ground. Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into the surface beneath you. Feel the weight of your head. Feel the weight of your arms. There is nowhere you need to go. There is nothing you need to do. Tonight, you are simply going to rest. Take one slow, easy breath in through your nose. And let it go. Once more. A slow, deep breath, drawing the air all the way down into the base of your lungs. And a long, slow exhale. Good. Tonight, I am going to take you somewhere ancient. Somewhere vast. Somewhere where the sky stretches in every direction and the stars are so bright and so countless that they feel like a second earth above you, soft and luminous, an upside-down sea of living light. We are going to the Silk Road. Not the Silk Road of merchants rushing and camels straining under heavy loads. Not the road of commerce and urgency. We are going to the Silk Road at night. The Silk Road when the caravans have stilled and the desert has grown quiet and the only sound is the whispering movement of sand across ancient stone paths worn smooth by 1,000 years of gentle feet. Along this road tonight, you will travel with two friends. Their names are Libby and Charrie. Libby is a studious herbalist. She has been gathering and studying the healing plants of Central Asia since she was a young girl, moving from village to village with her grandmother, learning the name and nature of every root and leaf and blossom. She carries a worn leather satchel over one shoulder, and inside it, wrapped in soft cloth and small clay jars, are her treasures, bundles of dried lavender, gathered from high mountain meadows, pouches of desert sage, which smells like the earth after rare rain, small vials of rose oil pressed from the roses of Fergana, and a dozen other remedies known only to healers of her lineage. Libby's long hair is tied back with a ribbon of pale silk, and when the desert breeze catches it, the loose strands drift and shimmer like dark water. She rides her camel with the easy comfort of someone who has spent years in the saddle, one hand resting on her satchel, the other loose on the reins. Charrie is a skilled weaver and navigator. She was born in the mountains, in a village where the women learned to read the stars the same way they learned to read the patterns in thread, each point of light a known coordinate, each constellation a story that also served as a map. Charrie carries a lantern of hammered brass that throws a warm amber circle of light around both riders as they travel. At her belt hangs a leather pouch containing spools of dyed silk cord in every color, tools of her weaving craft that she has found, over many years, to be useful for dozens of purposes beyond the loom. Her shoulder-length hair is dark and practical, tucked behind her ears, her eyes always moving between the path ahead and the sky above. She sits tall and steady in the saddle of her camel, riding with a confident, rhythmic grace, as though the desert itself recognizes the sound of her camel's footsteps. Tonight, Libby and Charrie are traveling toward a legendary Caravanserai, an ancient way station built into the side of a rocky hill at the edge of a hidden valley. They have heard of this place since childhood. Travelers who have stayed there describe it in terms usually reserved for dreams: cool rooms with deep-set windows, jasmine climbing the inner courtyard walls, a central fountain that never runs dry, silk blankets weighted just enough to feel like a gentle embrace. The kind of rest, they say, that heals something more than just the body. But tonight's journey is not only about arriving. As the sun dips below the horizon and the great dome of the Central Asian sky begins to reveal its hidden depths, Libby and Charrie will encounter moments along the path that ask something small of them, a quiet act of care, a gentle use of their skills, an offering of time and attention to something that needs them. And in giving, they will find that the peace they were riding toward has, in fact, been riding beside them all along. So now, dear traveler, let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breath find its own slow rhythm. Let the sounds around you fade until all you can hear is the quiet voice of this story and the soft presence of the desert night. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. The sun is going down over the golden sands. And Libby and Charrie have just begun to ride. Chapter 1. The Departure of Light. The last light of the day is the color of embers. Not the sharp gold of midday, not the cheerful yellow of morning, but something deeper and quieter, a burnished amber that lies across the top of every dune like a warm cloth draped over sleeping shoulders. The sky above is not yet dark. It occupies that particular and brief twilight hue that has no simple name, part rose, part violet, part the deep blue of water and shadow, all of it blending in long horizontal bands that shift and deepen even as you watch. Libby slows her camel to a gentle stop at the crest of a dune and tilts her head back. She is watching the sky change. She does this every evening when she travels, stops, wherever she is, and gives herself 30 seconds to simply observe the moment the day releases its hold on the light. Her grandmother taught her this. You cannot be grateful for a thing you do not notice, the old woman used to say. And you cannot notice a thing you are too busy to stop for. So Libby stops. 30 seconds. Every evening. She has done it in mountain passes and river valleys and market squares and mud brick villages so small they had no name. She does it now, in the desert, at the top of a golden dune, with the warm breath of the sand moving through her hair and the amber evening light touching her face. Her camel stands at perfect ease beneath her, broad-footed on the crest of the dune, as still and patient as the stone formations that rise from the desert floor, utterly unbothered by the grandeur of the evening unfolding around it. Charrie rides up beside her. The brass lantern swings gently from a hook on her saddle, not yet lit. There is still enough light in the sky for riding without it. Charrie has learned, over their years of traveling together, not to interrupt Libby's 30 seconds. She simply slows her camel as well and sits beside her friend, and for a half-minute, both women are still, watching the sky. The desert around them is not the flat, featureless expanse that some imagine when they think of sand. It is varied and alive in its stillness. The dunes rise and fall in long, sweeping curves, their ridges sharp as calligraphy strokes, their faces soft and rippled where the afternoon wind spent hours rearranging each grain with patient, invisible hands. Between the larger dunes, shallow hollows collect the shadows, already a darker purple than the sky, small pools of early night gathering in the low places first. Sparse desert grasses grow in tufts along the windward sides of certain dunes, tough, thin-stemmed things, pale gold and silver, that tremble in the faint evening breeze. Their movement is barely perceptible. A whisper of animation in an otherwise immense stillness. And here and there, at the base of stone formations where moisture gathers and lingers, small desert flowers cling and bloom, tiny white and pale blue cups, almost impossibly delicate, somehow surviving in this vast and arid world by finding the smallest pockets of what they need. Libby's 30 seconds ends. She exhales slowly. "First star," Charrie says quietly, pointing toward the east with 2 fingers, the way navigators point, not jabbing, but indicating, as though you might disturb the star if you pointed too forcefully at it. Libby looks. And there it is. A single bright point in the deepening blue of the eastern sky, steady and clear, like a lamp left burning in an upstairs window of a house you are glad to be riding toward. "That is Arcturus," Charrie says. "Do you remember? I showed you Arcturus once, years ago, when we were traveling through the mountain pass above Samarkand. We had made camp on a ledge, and you complained that the ground was too hard, and I said the stars would compensate. I remember that the ground was indeed very hard," Libby says, "and that you were entirely correct about the stars." Charrie makes a small sound of satisfaction. They begin riding again. Charrie leads, because she always leads when the path is ambiguous, and the path across a desert is often ambiguous, particularly at dusk, when the light flattens and the shadows pool and what seemed like a clear route becomes a subtle puzzle of rise and fall. Her camel moves with a long, rolling stride that sets a natural rhythm, its great padded feet pressing softly into the sand, leaving a trail of wide, shallow prints behind them. Charrie moves with the unhurried confidence of someone who has learned that the best way to find your way across uncertain ground is not to force certainty upon it but to remain alert and flexible, ready to adjust, trusting that the path will present itself to those patient enough to let it. Libby rides a half step behind, not because she is following blindly, but because this is their comfortable arrangement, one that developed naturally over years of shared travel. From her position, she can watch the landscape in all directions without the responsibility of navigation, which means she can notice things. Small things. The way the dunes lean away from the prevailing wind. The way certain stones catch and hold the heat of the day and release it slowly into the evening air, so that if you ride close enough to one of these stones, you can feel its gentle warmth on the side of your face like the last trace of an old fire. Her camel moves beneath her with its own particular intelligence. She has ridden this camel for 2 years now and knows every nuance of its gait, the slight lean it makes when it is curious about something on the left, the way it lifts its chin when it smells water in the distance. The sky is deepening by the minute now. That transitional band of rose and violet above the western horizon is fading, being overtaken by the true night blue that presses in from the east. And with the darkness comes a quality of silence that is different from the silence of the day, richer, more complete, more personal. The day silence of a desert is empty. The night silence of a desert is full. Charrie lights the lantern. It is a small ceremony in itself. She slows her camel to a stop, unclips the lantern from the saddle hook, and produces from her belt pouch a small fire striker, a piece of flint and a curved bit of steel, well worn from use. 2 strikes, 3 strikes. The wick catches. The flame steadies. She adjusts the wick with a careful finger, brings it to the right height, bright enough to see the immediate path, small enough not to overwhelm the starlight above. Then she rehooks the lantern to the saddle and urges her camel forward again. The amber circle of light spills around both camels and onto the sand. "How's your back?" Charrie asks, glancing behind her at Libby. Libby had strained her back slightly, carrying a heavy water skin from a well 2 days ago. Nothing serious, but Charrie has been checking. "Fine," Libby says. "Truly. I barely notice it now." "Good." Charrie faces forward again. The path ahead levels out. There is a long, flat section between the dunes. The sand will be firm there, easier for the camels. We should reach it in about 20 minutes. And after the flat section, I'll pass through a low ridge of rocks. The path is well worn, many caravans before us have cut it smooth. And then, if the maps in my head are correct, which they usually are. They are always correct, Libby says. Yes. Well, after the ridge, we should see the first lights of the Caravanserai across the valley. It is perhaps 2 hours of riding after that. Easy riding. Downhill, mostly. Downhill, Libby repeats, with a small sound of pleasure. Good. They ride in comfortable silence for a while. This is one of the great luxuries of long friendship, the ability to be silent together without it meaning anything beyond the fact that you are both, in this moment, content to simply be, side by side, moving through the world. The camels seem to share this ease. They pace in near-perfect synchrony, their footfalls landing close in time, their long necks swaying with the same gentle forward rhythm. There is something deeply soothing about the motion of a camel at a walking pace, that slow, rocking undulation that begins in the shoulders and travels gently down through the rider, a motion like being carried by a great and patient river. The stars continue to appear. There is a particular pleasure in watching a sky fill with stars that you cannot experience by looking at it all at once. You have to catch it in process, look away, look back, and notice that what was 3 stars is now 9, and what was 9 is now 20, and eventually, slowly, the whole vast architecture of the night unfolds above you, and you realize it was always there, waiting for the sun to step aside. Libby watches this process with the same calm attention she gives to the 30-second sunset ritual. She does not try to count the stars or name them. That is Charrie's art, not hers. She simply receives them. She lets the sight of them enter her eyes and travel down to whatever part of the body holds awe. The chest, she thinks. All lives in the chest, in the soft hollow just below the sternum, where the ribs open like cupped hands. The sand beneath the camel's feet changes texture as they descend from the dune's crest and move toward the flat section Charrie described. Loose and shifting at the top, it becomes firmer and more solid as they go lower, and then they are on the flat, and the riding is indeed easier, a smooth, hard-packed surface where the wind-blown sand has been compacted over countless seasons into something almost like a road. The camel's footfalls, which had been quiet and effortful in the soft sand above, become cleaner, more rhythmic, a steady muffled drumming in the still night. Charrie's camel sets a pace that is almost meditative. Not too slow, not too fast. A pace that the body can sustain indefinitely without strain, a pace that allows the mind to go soft and broad, like the sky, rather than sharp and narrow, like a worry. The stars above are dense now in the center of the sky, scattered thin along the horizons where the last atmospherics of day still interfere, dense and brilliant and countless overhead where the night is complete. The Milky Way has begun to appear, that broad, river-like sweep of compacted light that represents not a thing you can point to but a direction you are facing, a view into the thickness of your own galaxy, a looking inward and outward at the same time. Do you smell that? Libby says. Charrie pauses. Breathes. Sage. Wild sage. Growing somewhere nearby. The evening warmth is releasing its oils. The smell is extraordinarily clean. It is the smell of something that has been growing in difficult conditions for a long time and has concentrated all of its vitality into a single aromatic compound that it releases into the cool evening air like a gift, a small act of generosity from a plant whose only luxury is its fragrance. Libby breathes it in deeply, letting it fill her lungs, feeling it open her sinuses and cool the back of her throat. This is what she loves about traveling through the desert at night, the way the cooling air releases the stored perfumes of the day. Sage. Mineral stone. Occasionally, at certain elevations, something almost like pine resin from distant mountains carried on the upper altitude winds. Each breath outdoors is a small education. They reach the rocky ridge Charrie mentioned. The path here is narrow but well-worn, twisting between large boulders that have stood since long before any road existed here, that will stand long after the road has been forgotten. The rocks are still warm from the day's sun and the warmth radiates from them in the narrow passage between, creating a brief microclimate of comfort. Charrie guides her camel carefully through the pass, speaking to it in a low, steady voice, a habit of hers, narrating the path to her animal, which responds to the sound of her voice more than to the reins. Libby follows, her own camel tucking its long legs with surprising precision between the stones, navigating the rocky corridor with the same ancient instinctive knowledge that its species has carried through desert travel since before memory. It takes perhaps 10 minutes to move through the ridge. And then they are through. And there, spread below them in the valley, is what they were riding toward. Lights. Small, warm lights, amber and pale gold, arranged in a loose cluster in the darkness of the valley floor. Even from this distance, even seen only as points of light against the surrounding dark, the Caravanserai communicates something. Shelter. Warmth. Rest. The instinctive human response to light and darkness, the sense that where there is a fire, there are people, and where there are people, you are not alone, and where you are not alone, something good may be possible. Libby sits up taller in her saddle and looks down at those lights for a long moment. There it is, she says softly. There it is, Charrie confirms. There is something in the way both women say it, not triumphant, not even particularly excited, but simply glad. The gladness of confirmation. Of something seen ahead that has, until this moment, existed only in description. Of a destination that had been a story becoming, incrementally, a place. But they do not rush. This is important. They do not look at those lights and kick their camels into a faster pace, letting the vision of the goal pull them forward and past the pleasure of the journey. Instead, they sit a moment longer at the top of the ridge, looking down, breathing, feeling the night air on their faces, letting the sight be a gift, not a command. Then Charrie gently urges her camel forward and begins the descent, careful and steady, the lantern swinging at the saddle, the amber light moving across the stone, and Libby follows, one hand trailing lightly along the face of a warm boulder as they pass it, touching the ancient rock in a brief gesture of thanks, before the path opens and the slope begins and there is only the dark valley ahead and the warm light below and the immense, brilliant sky above. The descent from the ridge is gentle at first, then steeper for a short section, then leveling out as they move away from the rocky base and onto the broader valley floor. The sand here is different, darker, slightly damp with the cold of the coming night, the kind of sand that holds a camel print cleanly and completely, recording each step with the same fidelity as fresh snow. The night has settled fully now. There is no more twilight anywhere on any horizon. The world is divided simply, the dark earth below and the brilliant sky above and the two women riding between them, the small amber lantern marking their position in the darkness like a moving star descended to ground level to see the world from a different angle. The temperature has dropped, but not unpleasantly. It is the clean, dry cool of a desert night, refreshing rather than harsh, the kind of cold that makes you pull your traveling robe a little closer and feel grateful for the warmth of your own body, for the fact of being alive and warm and moving through a beautiful world. Libby's hair, loosened slightly by the evening's riding, drifts and curls in the faint night breeze. She tucks a strand behind her ear absently, her attention on the valley ahead, on the growing nearness of those lights, on the sound of the camel's footfalls on the firm valley sand, a rhythm like a pulse, like a heartbeat, like something essential and steady at the center of everything. Let that rhythm carry you for a moment. The slow, rocking sway of the camel's gait, back and forth, gentle and steady, unhurried as the stars. You are riding too, in your mind, in whatever way feels easy and right. You are riding across this ancient valley under these impossible stars, and your only task is to follow the lantern's amber light toward the warmth that waits ahead. Chapter 2. The Silver Fox's Plea. It is Charrie who first notices the sound. She has, over many years of desert travel, developed a particular sensitivity to sounds that are out of place, not alarming sounds, not loud sounds, but the quiet sound of something in distress. It is a soft sound, almost nothing, barely distinguishable from the general texture of the night. A faint, irregular breath, almost like a very small sigh, coming from somewhere slightly below and to the left of the path. Charrie slows her camel and holds up one hand. Libby draws her own camel to a stop a half-step later. What is it? Listen. They both go still. Even the camels seem to sense it, lowering their great heads slightly, their ears swiveling forward. The desert holds its breath around them. And then, in the brief pause between one wind sigh and the next, they hear it. A tiny, fragile sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a breath. Something in between. Something small and alive and uncertain. Charrie unhooks the lantern from the saddle and holds it out to the side, angling it downward, tilting the amber circle of light toward the low ground beside the path. There, tucked against the base of a wind-carved sandstone formation no larger than a crouching person, partially hidden in the shadow of an overhang of rock, lies a small fox. A silver fox. Very young. Perhaps 4 or 5 months old, old enough to have left the den but young enough to still be dependent on its mother, still carrying that particular quality of animal youth that is simultaneously touching and precarious. Its fur is the pale silver tan of desert sand, with darker points at the ears and tail tip, so well camouflaged to its environment that in daylight you might ride within a meter of it and not see it. In the amber lantern light, it looks luminous. Its large, triangular ears, oversized for its face, the way a puppy's paws are too large for its body, a sign of how much growing remains to be done, are laid back flat against its skull. Its eyes are wide open and glassy with what Libby immediately recognizes as exhaustion. It is not injured, not visibly, no blood, no obvious wound. But it is lying on its side with a kind of total relaxation that would be peaceful if it were not, in a creature this young and this alone, clearly the relaxation of something that has been too tired for too long. Libby dismounts smoothly from her camel, handing the reins to Charrie without a word, already opening her satchel. "Easy," she says, and it is not entirely clear whether she is speaking to the fox or to herself. "Easy. We see you. You are all right." Charrie holds both camels steady and says nothing. She knows Libby's way with injured and exhausted creatures, has seen it dozens of times over the years, the way Libby seems to enter a particular quality of stillness when an animal needs her, a slowing of all movement, all breath, all energy, as though her very presence can become something calm and non-threatening, something that small, frightened things can lean into. The silver fox does not move as Libby crouches. It watches her with those wide, exhausted eyes, alert but too spent for flight. Its small sides rise and fall with shallow, rapid breaths. "Dehydration," Libby says quietly. "And fatigue. It has been running. Separated from its family, I think. Lost." She finds what she is looking for in the satchel. A small bundle of dried lavender, wrapped in pale cloth, not the culinary lavender that you might find in a kitchen, but wild desert lavender, harvested from the higher elevations of the Tian Shan range, where the plants grow in the thin, clean air and develop a concentration of calming oils that domesticated lavender cannot match. She unwraps it carefully, and immediately the scent rises, cool and herbaceous and deep, that particular lavender perfume that exists at the intersection of the botanical and the therapeutic, a smell that is itself almost a medicine. She holds it at a gentle distance from the fox. Not directly under its nose, that would be overwhelming, intrusive. But close enough that the night breeze carries the scent toward it on the air, an offering rather than an imposition. The silver fox's nose twitches. Its rapid breathing slows, almost imperceptibly. Just a fraction. Just the very beginning of something. Libby reaches into the satchel again and produces a folded piece of leather that unrolls to reveal a small collection of herbs in separate compartments, each one a different tool for a different purpose. She selects a pinch of dry desert sage and rubs it very gently between her fingers, releasing its oils, then holds it a little closer to the fox than the lavender. Desert sage has a different quality from lavender, where lavender soothes, sage grounds. It is the smell of the earth itself, of rock and dry soil and the long memory of the land. For a creature of the desert, born and nursed in a den lined with the same desert materials, the smell of sage is essentially the smell of home. The silver fox's ears, which had been flat, lift slightly. Not alert, not frightened alert, not the sharp uprightness of a creature about to flee. Something softer. A kind of attention. A recognition. There, Libby murmurs. There you go. She has also, while doing all of this, been slowly moving her hand closer to the fox, not in a grabbing motion, nothing sudden or purposeful, but in the way water moves downhill, inevitably, gradually, without urgency. Her hand comes to rest on the ground about 15 centimeters from the fox's side. She holds it there, palm down, fingers relaxed, offering warmth without touching. Letting the fox decide. A long moment passes. The night sounds fill the gap, the distant sound of the wind, the very faint creak of the lantern in Charrie's hand, the almost inaudible sound of sand moving against sand on the dune faces above them. Behind Libby, both camels stand utterly quiet, their great warm bodies like soft walls between the small scene and the open desert, as though they too understand that this moment requires stillness. And then the silver fox shifts. A small, careful movement, it rolls slightly toward Libby's hand, bringing its flank into contact with her fingers. Not dramatically. Not with any sudden expenditure of the trust that is also, in this moment, the last of its energy. Simply a leaning. A small, tired decision to accept the warmth that was being offered. Libby stays perfectly still and lets the fox lean against her hand. "Charrie," she says very quietly. "The small clay jar. The one with the blue cord around the neck." Charrie carefully passes the lantern to the saddle hook of the nearest camel and moves slowly to Libby's side, opening the satchel and finding the jar, pale gray clay, sealed with a cork and tied with a small loop of blue cord so Libby can find it by touch in a dark bag. She passes it carefully to Libby. Inside the jar is a water-based tincture that Libby makes herself from 3 ingredients, a desert plant called camel thorn, which stores moisture in its thick-walled stems, a mineral salt found naturally in certain desert pools, and a trace of dried chamomile. Together, these create a mild, nourishing liquid that can help restore a dehydrated creature without overwhelming it. She uses it sometimes for exhausted travelers who have run out of water and drunk too little for too long. She has also used it for birds, for a goat she found separated from a herd, for a dog she encountered in a mountain village that was too old and too ill for anything but gentle support. She removes the cork. The faint smell of chamomile and mineral earth rises from the jar. She tips it very carefully, letting a small amount pool in the shallow of her palm, just a few drops, just a taste, placed close enough to the fox's muzzle that it can reach it without moving, without any expenditure of energy beyond the slight extension of its tongue. The fox's nose works. Its tongue appears. A small, careful lick. A pause. Another lick. And then, with the slightly more purposeful focus of something that has found what it needs, a steady, small drinking of the few drops in Libby's palm. Libby provides more. Never rushing, never tipping too fast, just small amounts, patiently, letting the fox drink at its own pace, at its own rhythm, never asking more of it than it has to give. Charrie, sitting cross-legged beside her friend in the sand, watches this process with the quiet appreciation of someone who has seen it before but is not, on this account, any less moved by it. There is something about the quality of Libby's care, the attention, the patience, the complete lack of performance or self-congratulation in it, that makes it genuinely beautiful to witness. She is not being kind because it is observed. She is being kind because the fox is here and the fox needs it and she is what is needed. It is as simple and as profound as that. After some time, 10 minutes, perhaps 15, neither of them tracking it, the silver fox has drunk what it will drink and rested what it will rest, and Libby can feel the change in the weight of it against her hand, less desperate, slightly more present, the quality of its breathing less shallow and rapid, more settled and slow. The fox lifts its head. It looks at Libby. Not with fear, not with gratitude. Animals do not experience gratitude the way humans understand it, and Libby has never expected them to. But with something. With a quality of directness, of recognition, of a brief and genuine contact between one creature and another that has occurred across whatever usually keeps them separate. Then it looks past her, toward the broader darkness of the valley. Its large ears swivel forward. Its nose lifts and works the air. Something far away and familiar is in the desert night, a scent, a sound, something below the range of human perception but perfectly clear to it. The silver fox rises. It is unsteady for a moment on its thin legs, but only a moment. It shakes itself once, a full-body shiver, the way dogs shake after emerging from water, and then it is balanced, upright, fully itself again. It takes one step away. Then pauses. Then 2 more steps. Then it looks back at Libby over its silver-tan shoulder with those large, luminous eyes, and there is a moment, brief, exact, complete, of wordless acknowledgement between them. Then it moves. Quickly now, purposefully, its brushtail low and streamlined, its body moving with the elegant efficiency of a creature that belongs completely to its environment. It moves between 2 dunes and into the dark, and within seconds it is invisible, not gone, exactly, but returned to the desert night, to whatever family or den or familiar territory is calling it from somewhere out in the sweet, starlit dark. Libby remains crouching for a moment after it has gone. She is listening to the sound of the fox's soft breathing, still present in some sense in the air around her, in the warmth where it rested against her hand, in the way this particular stretch of the desert night now holds a different quality, not just empty darkness but a place where something small and alive found safety for a brief time and was restored enough to find its way home. "Come on," Charrie says gently, rising to her feet and offering Libby a hand. Libby takes it and stands. She recorks the clay jar, ties the blue cord closed, tucks it back into its pocket in the satchel. She wraps the lavender back in its pale cloth. She does these small housekeeping tasks with the same quiet attention she gives everything, not rushing, doing each thing fully before moving to the next. Your hands are cold, Charrie observes. The night is cool. I have been sitting still. Charrie takes both of Libby's hands in hers briefly and holds them, warming them. A simple, practical act of friendship. Then she releases them and helps Libby remount her camel, the animal lowering itself obligingly to the kneeling position with a long, slow groan that is utterly without complaint. And they are riding again. For a while neither of them speaks, and the silence is not empty but full of what just happened, full of the presence of the desert and the stars and the small silver fox moving through the dark somewhere behind them. Full of the particular satisfaction that comes not from accomplishment or achievement but from a very simple form of rightness, being in the right place at the right time and offering what you happen to have. The valley opens ahead of them. The lantern lights of the Caravanserai are closer now, more defined, more individual, no longer just a glow but distinct points and shapes, a lamp in a high window, the larger warm rectangle of a doorway standing open, the moving amber flicker of what might be a courtyard brazier. Libby speaks first, and what she says is this. I keep thinking about what my grandmother used to say. That the plants taught her more about patience than any teacher she ever had. Because the plants don't hurry. They don't push. They simply offer what they have, in the right season, and wait. Charrie considers this. Do you think the fox knew it was safe? I think it recognized something familiar. The sage. The chamomile. Smells it knew from the desert. Smells that meant home, or something close to it. And then. She pauses, searching for the right words. Then it let itself rest, because the thing it was afraid of, being alone in the wrong kind of dark, was, for that moment, not present. Charrie rides a few more paces in thoughtful silence. That's what rest requires, isn't it? The absence of the wrong kind of dark. Libby considers this. Yes, she says, eventually. I think that is exactly what rest requires. Chapter 3. A lantern in the distance. The road to the Caravanserai follows the low ground of the valley, and at a certain point it becomes, undeniably, a road, not the suggestive path across sand that they have been following since the ridge, but an actual road, ancient and clearly defined, two shallow ruts worn into the rocky soil of the valley floor by centuries of cartwheels. And between those ruts a strip of compressed earth where the feet and hooves of countless travelers have, generation by generation, made smooth what was once rough. Libby runs her gaze along the ruts as they ride over them. How many wheels have tracked this path? How many caravans, carrying silk and spice and glass and ideas from one end of the known world to the other, have passed through this valley and left this mark? It is humbling, in the good way, the way that reminds you that you are part of something much larger and much longer than your own individual story. It is Libby, this time, who first notices the figure. About 200 meters ahead, slightly off the road on the right side, a lantern is burning at ground level. Not hanging, not carried, sitting on the earth, which means either it has been set down or it has been dropped. And beside the lantern, In the shape of things that the warm light barely illuminates at this distance, is a cart. A small, two-wheeled cart of the kind used by individual merchants traveling light. And beside the cart, sitting on a large stone with the posture of someone who has been sitting there for some time and is not entirely sure what to do next, is a person. "Someone has stopped," Libby says. "I see them." Charrie's tone does not change, does not quicken with alarm, does not hesitate with uncertainty. She has encountered stopped travelers before on many roads in many parts of the world, and her policy is always the same: you approach, slowly and openly, so that you are seen and identified as non-threatening before you arrive, and you ask whether you can help, and you take it from there. She holds the lantern slightly higher as they approach on their camels, making their own light more visible, announcing themselves not with a shout but with brightness. As they draw closer, the figure on the stone resolves into a man, elderly, with a long white beard and the deeply weathered face of someone who has spent most of his life outdoors in the Central Asian sun and wind. He wears a merchant's traveling robe of a faded deep blue, belted with a wide sash in which, Libby notices, various items have been tucked: a small pouch, a folded document, a short knife and a worn leather sheath. On his head, a round felt cap that has been pressed into every conceivable shape by long use. He watches them approach on their camels without alarm, either because he is too old to be alarmed by things that are not yet confirmed as threats, or because he has cultivated, over a lifetime of traveling this road, a kind of philosophical equanimity about whatever the night might bring. "Travelers," he says in greeting, as they come within easy speaking distance. His voice is deep and carries the particular resonance of someone accustomed to projecting it across open spaces. "Travelers," Charrie responds, the formal acknowledgement travelers use on this road, not a greeting of the city, with its elaborate courtesies, but the simple recognition of equals on the road. "What ails your cart?" The old man sighs with such completeness and resignation that both women feel the weight of it from 2 meters away. "The left wheel," he says. "The pin that holds it on the axle has sheared. I have been sitting here considering my situation for perhaps an hour." Charrie dismounts from her camel and walks around the cart, holding her lantern low to examine the wheel. The problem is immediately apparent. Where the iron pin should sit, there is a gap, and the wheel leans outward at a slight angle, held only by the weight of the cart pressing down on it. If he were to try to move the cart as it is, the wheel would come off entirely within 50 meters. "Do you have a replacement pin?" she asks. "I did not think to carry a replacement pin," the old man says, with the tone of someone who is being entirely fair with himself about this shortcoming. "I have been making this journey twice a year for 20 years and the pin has never sheared before. I begin to suspect the wheelmaker in Turfin has been reducing the quality of his iron." Charrie is already thinking. This is how her mind works in practical emergencies. Not by worrying about the problem but by immediately cataloging the available materials and the possible solutions. She crouches beside the wheel, examining the axle hole, measuring the diameter with her fingers. Then she reaches into the leather pouch at her belt and begins working through her spools of silk cord. Silk cord is, in her experience, one of the most versatile materials in existence. As a navigator, she uses it to mark distances and bearings. As a weaver, she works with it in dozens of weights and configurations. And as a traveler, she has found uses for it that her weaving teachers never anticipated, securing loose cargo, creating emergency hinges, binding split wood, patching ripped canvas. And now, perhaps, bridging a sheared axle pin. She selects a spool of her thickest cord, the dark gold braided kind, 3 strands of heavy silk twisted together, used for the structural borders of large tapestries. She cuts a length with a small knife from her satchel, measuring it against the axle with her eye, then cuts a second length. "Hold the wheel steady," she says to Libby, who is also dismounted and comes immediately to crouch beside the wheel, holding it level with both hands. What Charrie does next is not simple, but she does it with the ease of someone for whom knots in tension and the behavior of cord under load are as legible as text. She threads the silk cord through the axle hole in a specific configuration, not simply tying it on, which would be inadequate, but creating a structural element that distributes the load across the cord rather than concentrating it at a single point. Her fingers move with the precise, practiced economy of someone who has spent years learning the language of thread and tension. The old merchant watches her with what appears to be genuine fascination. "You are a weaver," he says, not as a question. "Among other things," Charrie says, without looking up from her work. "I carry silk," the old man says, nodding toward the cart, where a number of bundles are wrapped and secured with coarser rope. "From Hotan. The finest white silk in the world, from Hotan. I have been trading it for 30 years, first with my father, then alone. Every kind of silk imaginable, I have handled. But I do not know how to make it. That is a different kind of knowledge." "All knowledge is different," Libby says, settled back on her heels beside the cart, her hands still steadying the wheel while Charrie works. "That is what makes traveling useful. Every person on the road knows something the others do not." The old man considers this, tilting his head the way people do when a thought arrives at a slight angle to what they expected. "You are right," he says. "That is exactly right." While Charrie works on the wheel and Libby holds it steady, the old merchant, whose name turns out to be Khaled, unfolds himself from his stone seat with the careful deliberateness of someone whose joints have opinions about rapid movement, and makes his way to a small wooden box secured to the back of the cart. He opens it with a key from inside his robe and produces, with a quality of ceremony that suggests he does this whenever circumstances offer the occasion, a tea kit. Not a simple traveler's kit, not just a pot and some dried leaves. A proper merchant's tea service, in miniature, a small brass pot with a long handle meant for heating over coals, a set of 3 porcelain cups, thin as paper and painted with a delicate blue pattern of flowering vines, each one nested in a cup of felt that protects it during travel, a small tin of tea, another small tin of cardamom, a third containing a compressed block of rock sugar. From another section of the wooden box, he produces a small folding brazier, a clever collapsible device of iron rods and a shallow pan, which he assembles with practiced ease. Into this he places a small cake of pressed charcoal and a twist of dry kindling, and from his belt pouch he produces a fire striker not unlike Charrie's. Within minutes, a small, contained fire is burning in the brass brazier, and the pot is filled from a water skin and set over the flame. You will drink tea with me, he says. It is not quite a question and not quite a command. It is the generous certainty of someone who knows that the offer is good and that the circumstances call for it. You have helped me. I cannot pay you. I have nothing that would be adequate payment for a weaver's skill. But I have very good tea and a clear night, and that will have to serve. Tea is more than adequate, Charrie says, without pausing in her work. The wheel repair takes perhaps 25 minutes from start to finish. When it is done, the cord bound in its precise configuration, the wheel level and secure, held in place not by iron but by the principle of distributed tension that Charrie has encoded into 2 lengths of dark gold silk, Charrie tests it thoroughly, pressing the wheel from several angles, rocking the cart, checking the cording at multiple points. Then she stands back and looks at it with the critical satisfaction of someone who has made something that works. It will last to the Caravanserai, she says. And in the morning, the smiths there can replace the pin properly. The Caravanserai, Khaled says, brightening. That is where I am going. I stop there twice a year on this route. I have a room reserved. Some merchants who travel this road have special arrangements with the keeper. I am one of them. Then we will travel the last part of the road together, Libby says. I would welcome the company, Khaled says simply. But first, tea. They settle around the brazier on stones and folded blankets that Khaled produces from the cart with quiet hospitality. The water is already beginning to simmer, not a rolling boil, which would be too harsh for good tea, but that particular stage of heating just before full boil where the bottom of the pot shows a pattern of small, rising bubbles and a first thread of steam rises from the surface. The camels stand quietly nearby, their long necks dipping occasionally as they investigate the ground with curious, velvet noses. Khaled adds the tea with the careful measure of someone for whom this ritual has deep significance. Then the cardamom, 2 pods, lightly cracked, added directly to the pot. The smell of cardamom released into the cool desert night is extraordinary, warm, spiced, slightly sweet, familiar in the way that only the things that have been part of human culture for thousands of years can be familiar. It is the smell of hospitality across an enormous stretch of time, a smell that connects you, through your own sensory memory and through something deeper than memory, to every fire and every pot and every gathering of travelers in the cold or the dark or the end of a long day, going back and back and back. The tea steeps. The sound of the pot is a companion in itself, a low, rhythmic clink as the metal expands slightly with the heat, the small, regular sound of liquid at simmer, neither boiling nor still but at that settled, rolling murmur, the occasional softer sound of one porcelain cup touching another as Khaled arranges them with neat, deliberate movements on the stone beside the brazier. Above them, the stars continue their slow business. The Milky Way is fully visible now, reaching from one horizon to the other in its great arching river of light, so dense in the center that it blurs into a continuous band, so clear at the edges that individual stars are distinct and counted. Libby, looking up, thinks about how many people over how many centuries have looked at this same arc of stars from this same valley. The stars do not change, on the scale of a human life. What Khaled sees and what Libby sees and what some shepherd looking up from this valley 2,000 years ago saw are all the same stars in the same configurations, the same patient presences, the same quiet witnesses. Khaled pours the tea. He does it with a particular style. He lifts the pot to a height that stretches the thin stream of tea as it falls into the cup, a technique that both aerates the tea and creates a small sound, the precise, glassy note of liquid meeting porcelain at the bottom of a thin-walled cup. It is a pleasant sound, a satisfying sound, the sonic version of the ritual, the announcement that something good is about to happen. He adds a small piece of rock sugar to each cup. Not stirred, the old way, the way that is called, in the tradition of tea on this road, the 3-sip method. You hold the sugar on your tongue, and you drink the hot tea through it, and the sugar dissolves slowly as you sip, so that the first sip is nearly unsweetened, and the second sip is a little sweeter, and the third sip is the sweetest, and in this way the cup tells a small, progressive story. Khaled explains this to them as he passes the cups, because it is his practice to always explain this. Tea teaches patience, he says, with the slight smile of someone who has said something true and knows it. They sit in a small, warm circle of firelight in the vast desert night and drink their tea. The cardamom tea is exceptional. Not the harsh, overbrewed kind that you might encounter in a hurried market stall, but a properly made cup, the tea itself with its deep, slightly earthy body, the cardamom contributing its warm, aromatic note without overwhelming, the rock sugar dissolving just as described, the sweetness arriving in slow progression. It is hot enough to hold the cold of the night at bay, but not so hot that you cannot drink it easily. It is the temperature of comfort. Khaled talks as they drink, not too much, not with the nervous chatter of someone who fears silence, but with the comfortable ease of an old traveler who has good stories and knows how to tell them at the right pace. He tells them about the silk he is carrying, the best qualities of Hotan white, how you test it by holding it up to a lamp and watching the light diffuse through it, how a fake or inferior silk will show dark threads while true Hotan silk will appear almost aglow from within. He tells them about the Caravanserai they are all traveling toward, the keeper, an old woman named Miriam who has run the place for 40 years and who knows, somehow, exactly what every traveler needs before they have asked for it. She brought me a pot of warm milk with anise the first night I ever stayed there, Khaled says. I had not asked for anything. I was sitting in my room and there was a knock at the door and there was Miriam with the milk. I asked how she knew and she just looked at me the way people look at you when the answer should be obvious and said, "You had the face of someone who needed warm milk." Libby laughs softly at this. I want to have that skill, she says. The ability to see what someone needs before they say it. You already have it, Charrie says, quietly. With the fox. A small silence falls, comfortable and warm. Khaled looks from one to the other with the perceptive attention of someone who has spent a lifetime reading travelers' faces, and whatever he reads in their faces makes him smile. How long have you been friends? He asks. Libby and Charrie look at each other, the way people look at each other when the answer is both simple and complicated. Since we were 7 years old, Libby says. Our grandmothers were friends, and they brought us to meet each other at a spring festival in Fergana, and we spent the whole afternoon arguing about which of 2 goats at the festival market was larger. She was wrong about the goats, Charrie adds, pleasantly. I was clearly right about the goats and have been proved right by the subsequent 30 years of friendship, Libby says, in the tone of someone who has said this many times and enjoys saying it. Khaled shakes his head in the gentle, appreciative way of someone who is witnessing something that affirms his view of the world. 30 years, he says. What a treasure. The tea is finished. The cups are empty. The small braziers burning low, the charcoal reduced to a bed of orange-red coals that give off heat without flame. The stars above are, if possible, even brighter than before, this hour of the night, the deepest part of it, when the atmosphere has fully settled and the sky has given up every trace of the day's light, is when they are most vivid, most dense, most present. Khaled packs his tea service with the same care with which he unpacked it, each cup nested in its felt ring, the brass pot rinsed with the last of the water and dried with a small cloth before it goes back in the box. He collapses the brazier, places the cold coals into a small tin. Every movement considered, efficient, unhurried. "Shall we ride?" he says, when everything is secured. "Let's ride," Charrie agrees. And so the three of them continue down the valley road together, Charrie ahead on her camel with the lantern, Khaled in the cart in the middle, the repaired wheel rolling smooth and true on the ancient road, and Libby at the back, where she can watch both the stars above and the warm amber light ahead that marks her friend. The cart makes a quiet, rhythmic sound on the road, the soft rolling of the wheel on packed earth, the very occasional creak of the cart body. The camels pace alongside at their unhurried stride, their warm breath clouding faintly in the cool air and drifting away into the night. The lights of the Caravanserai are close now. Close enough that you can make out more details. The dark line of a wall, the taller shape of what might be a minaret or a watchtower, the warm yellow glow of multiple courtyard lanterns, and above it all, the slight haze of wood fire smoke drifting upward from cooking hearths into the cold night air. Breathe in the cool night air. Breathe in the faint trace of wood smoke and cardamom that lingers around you. You are nearly there. The warmth is ahead, the rest is ahead, and you are riding toward it at exactly the right pace. Chapter 4. The Whispering Oasis. Before the Caravanserai, there is the Oasis. This is the first thing travelers on this road learn about the approach, that the valley dips one final time before rising to the Caravanserai's hill, and in that dip, fed by an underground spring that has never, in recorded history, run dry, there is a pool. Around the pool grow a handful of palm trees, old ones, with trunks like columns of braided stone and crowns of palm fronds that spread and dip in the night breeze with a sound like the softest, driest rain imaginable. Around the palms, lower vegetation, reeds at the water's edge, some small desert willows whose long, thin leaves move constantly, and a scattering of low-flowering plants that have found their way here over the years, drawn by the moisture, and stayed. Charrie knows this place from her maps and from the accounts of other travelers. She has been here once before, years ago, on a different journey, and she has never forgotten it. She slows her camel when they reach it. "We should rest here for a while," she says. Not because they need to, practically speaking, the Caravanserai is perhaps 45 minutes of riding from here, and they are not exhausted. But because this place invites rest. Because some places in the world carry that quality, that suggestion, that welcome, and to ride past them without accepting the invitation is a small act of ingratitude toward the world. Khaled agrees without hesitation. He ties his cart to the base of a palm tree with a practiced loop of rope and settles himself on a flat stone by the water's edge with the sigh of someone who is deeply and genuinely glad to sit down. Charrie and Libby dismount their camels and lead them to the edge of the pool, letting the animals drink their fill of the cool, clear water. The camels drink deeply and unhurriedly, their great heads lowering in long, slow sweeps, the sound of their drinking soft and steady in the quiet night. When they have had enough, both women tether them loosely to the palms, where the animals stand in contented ease, their warm flanks rising and falling in slow breath. Libby walks directly to the water's edge. She crouches at the edge and looks at it. The pool is perhaps 15 meters across at its widest point, shaped by the contours of the stone basin it has worn into the rock over an immensity of time. The water is still, not the forced stillness of stagnation, but the natural stillness of something fed from below, from deep underground, from pressures that move slowly and quietly, emerging into this basin and resting here before, presumably, seeping outward and downward again into the rock and sand that surrounds it. In the still water, perfectly reflected, is the sky. All of it. The entire sky. The Milky Way reflected in the surface of the water so precisely that for a moment the distinction between above and below loses its authority, and Libby feels, kneeling at the edge of this small desert pool in the middle of a vast night, that she is poised between two identical infinities, one above and one below, and the only thing keeping her from falling into either of them is the thin line of earth she is kneeling on. It is the most beautiful thing she has seen in a long time. She sits there and simply looks at it. Charrie extinguishes the lantern. She does it deliberately, with purpose, not because the fuel is low, but because there is something here that requires darkness to be fully appreciated, something that the amber warmth of the lantern, however welcome on the road, would diminish. She closes the glass door, dims the wick, and lets the flame go out. The darkness that follows is immense and immediate. For 10 or 15 seconds, while their eyes adjust, they are in a darkness so complete that they can barely see each other. Then, gradually, what was dark becomes visible. The starlight is enough. More than enough. The stars are so bright and so numerous that they cast, faintly but genuinely, a kind of light. Not illumination, you cannot read by it, you cannot navigate details by it, but presence. A visible presence that fills the space where the lantern dark was. And the reflection in the pool doubles it. The sound of the palm fronds is different from any sound they have heard today. It is the sound of living things moving in the night air, not the rustle of grasses, which is smaller and drier, not the whisper of sand across sand, which is softer and more uniform, but the specific, varied, complex sound of large palm fronds, the deep, leathery flecks of the outer fronds, the lighter, papery susurrus of the inner ones, and underneath it all, barely audible, the very slight sound of the palm trunk itself, that ancient fibrous column, adjusting to the small pressure of the wind in the water. The pool makes almost no sound, it is so still, so settled, that it is as close to silence as moving water can be. But not quite silence. At the far edge, where a thin seep of fresh water emerges from between two stones and falls the last few centimeters to the pool's surface, there is the smallest, most delicate sound, a trickle, a fall of water so slight it is more suggestive than heard, a soft, continuous whispering that has been happening in this valley since long before any human road was cut through it. Let yourself be here for a moment. You are sitting by this pool, in this desert, under these stars. There is nothing required of you. There is nowhere to be and nothing to manage and nothing to worry about. The palm fronds move and the water whispers and the stars are reflected in the still pool below and the stars are real above, and you are held between them in the warm, clean night. Feel the earth beneath you, solid and patient. Feel the slight warmth it still carries from the day, the stored heat of the sun radiating upward gently through the soles of your feet, through the ground where you sit. The earth has been keeping this warmth all day just so it could offer it to you now, in the coolness of the night. Khaled is very quiet. He has removed his felt cap and is holding it in his lap, and he is looking at the pool with the expression of someone who is, in this moment, not a merchant, not a traveler, not a man with a repaired wheel and a cart full of silk, just a person, in a beautiful place, at the end of a long day, grateful to be still. Charrie sits beside Libby. Not speaking. Not navigating. Not planning the next stage of the journey. Simply sitting, her hands in her lap, her eyes moving gently between the sky above and the sky below. This is something they both know, that you cannot force this quality of rest. You can create conditions for it, you can stop, you can be still, you can put down the lantern and let the dark come in, but the rest itself arrives in its own time, in its own way, without being summoned. The best you can do is be available to it. And both women are, in this moment, completely available. The singing bowl quality of the night itself, the particular resonance of the open desert under an open sky, hums at a frequency that seems to match something in the body. Not heard exactly, but felt. A low, warm vibration that has no source and no end, that seems to come from the air itself, from the stone of the ancient ridge behind them, from the still water of the pool, from the stars. Your breathing, right now, is slower than it was an hour ago. Slower, and more complete, each breath reaching further down into the lungs, each exhale releasing more than just air. Releasing the small tensions that accumulate without your noticing, in the jaw, in the shoulders, in the backs of the hands, in the space between the eyes. All of it releasing, softly, in the rhythm of this breath and this night and this pool of still water. Libby lies back on the smooth stone beside the pool. She does it gradually, lowering herself until she is horizontal, her head resting on her own folded arm, her face turned upward to the sky. From here, from this angle, from this specific position on this specific stone beside this specific pool, the sky is everything. Not the sky as a background to other things, but the sky as the primary reality, a dome of absolute depth, speckled with light in every direction, from the brightest stars that cast almost shadows to the faintest wisps of light at the very edge of visibility that you can only see if you don't look directly at them. She lies there and she breathes and she watches the sky and she thinks nothing in particular. Not because she is deliberately clearing her mind, that kind of effort defeats itself. but because the sky is so large and so deep and so patient that the mind, faced with it, finds its own level. Thoughts don't stop, exactly. They just become small, proportionate to the sky, and they move through without catching on anything, and there are longer and longer gaps between them, and in those gaps there is something that is not silence but is better than silence, the felt sense of being part of something immense and old and quietly magnificent. Charrie also lies back. She is looking at the same sky Libby is looking at, and she is identifying stars, not as a work task, not as a navigational need, but because this is, for her, a form of pure pleasure. She knows these stars the way some people know the faces of old friends, each one with its history, its name in several languages, its position in the turning sky, its relationship to the others. She moves from one to the next the way you might read a beloved letter, not for new information but for the pleasure of the words. Sirius, Vega, Deneb. The great summer triangle, still visible in the west, declining toward the horizon as the season turns. And overhead, directly above, at the zenith of the sky, a star that has no particularly famous name but that Charrie has always loved, a steady orange-gold point of light that seems, to her, to hold its position with particular firmness, as though it has decided that this is exactly where it should be and is perfectly content with that decision. You are lying back now, too. In your mind, in the soft landscape of this story, you have found your own flat stone beside this desert pool, and you have lowered yourself onto it, and the stone is smooth and slightly warm, and the sky above you is everything there is. Feel the weight of your body against the stone. Feel how heavy you are, how pleasantly, peacefully heavy. You don't need to hold yourself up. The stone is holding you. The earth is holding you. You are being held, completely and without effort, and all you have to do is let it happen. Your feet are heavy. Your legs are heavy. Your hips and your spine, pressed gently against the warm stone, are heavy. Your arms are heavy beside you. Your hands are heavy, and your fingers, one by one, are relaxing, not from tension you were consciously holding, but from the very last of that background effort, that micro-tension that the body maintains without permission when there is still a small part of the mind that thinks something might be needed. Nothing is needed. You can let it go. Your shoulders drop the last fraction. Your jaw unclenches softly. The muscles around your eyes, the ones that hold the expression of engagement and alertness, release their gentle grip, and your face becomes simply a face at rest, open, quiet, the features settling into their natural arrangement without effort or intention. The palm fronds move. The water whispers. The stars hold their positions in their vast patient arrangements above you, above the pool, above the desert, above everything. Somewhere nearby, a small night insect sings, a single, sustained note, high and pure, the nocturnal music of the desert. It is joined after a moment by another, slightly different in pitch, and then a third, and together they create a simple, unplanned harmony that has been playing in desert nights like this one for millions of years before any human ear was there to receive it, and that will continue long after tonight, long after any of us, patient and perfect and completely unconcerned with whether it is being appreciated. It is being appreciated. No one speaks for a very long time. There is nothing that needs to be said. The Oasis has taken over the conversation, conducting its own quiet address, the language of water and stone and night air and living things making their unhurried music in the dark. Eventually, slowly, as all rests must, this one comes to its natural close. Not because anything pulls them up, not urgency, not discomfort, not the pressure of any schedule. Simply the natural shift of the body that has received what it needed and begins, quietly and without drama, to gather itself for the final stage of the journey. Charrie sits up first. She looks at the pool one more time, at the stars reflected in it, at the perfect doubling of the sky. Then she relights the lantern, the flame catches immediately, steady and warm, and the circle of amber light returns, smaller and more intimate than the stars but friendly in its own way, a different quality of light for a different kind of attention. Libby sits up more slowly, taking her time, feeling the pleasant heaviness of a body that has been truly still for a while. She brushes a few grains of sand from her robe and stands. Khaled is already on his feet, untying the rope that secures his cart to the palm tree, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who knows the remainder of the journey is short and is ready to complete it. "Thank you," he says, and it is not clear whether he is thanking the Oasis, or the night, or his two companions, or all three at once. In the generous grammar of this old road, perhaps there is no meaningful distinction. "Thank you," Libby answers, in the same spirit. The camels are untethered and remounted, the animals rising from their resting positions with the slow, dignified sequence of a creature in no hurry whatsoever. And they begin to ride. Chapter 5. The Song of the Caravanserai. The final approach to the Caravanserai is uphill. Not a steep hill, not the kind of hill that demands effort or takes your breath away, but a long, gradual incline of perhaps a kilometer, the road climbing the gentle slope of the rocky hill on which the ancient way station was built, long before anyone alive today can remember, by people whose names are unrecorded but whose work has outlasted everything that was built in their era except this. The road here is paved. That is the first sign that you are near somewhere important. The packed earth gives way to a surface of flat, fitted stones, irregular in size but carefully matched at their edges, laid by craftsmen who understood that a road is a gift to everyone who will ever walk it. The stones have been worn smooth by centuries of use, and in the lantern light they glow with a warm, subtle luster, each stone its own shade of gold and gray and pale brown, each one carrying in its smoothness the record of every foot and wheel and camel pad that has ever passed over it. But not long after they begin the ascent, the sky above shifts in a way that none of them anticipated. The stars, which had been so brilliant and so generous throughout the entire night's journey, begin to disappear. Not in the way they disappear toward dawn, not gradually, not gently. A bank of cloud, invisible against the dark sky until it was nearly overhead, rolls in from the north with surprising speed, and within minutes it has swallowed the Milky Way entirely. Then the other stars, one cluster at a time, are erased from view. The moon has already set hours ago. The sky becomes a single, featureless black, not the deep, luminous near black of a clear desert night, but a true, pressing darkness, a darkness with weight to it, a darkness that feels close and total and entire. Charrie's lantern, which had been a cheerful accent to the starlight, is now the only light in all the visible world. And it is not enough. The lantern casts its amber circle around the two camels in the cart, but beyond that circle, on every side, there is simply nothing, no horizon, no shape, no suggestion of depth or distance. The ancient stone road beneath them continues, but its edges are invisible, and the slope of the hill is impossible to read, and the gentle curves that the path makes around the larger rock formations cannot be anticipated until the camels are already upon them. They slow to barely a walk. "I know this hill," Charrie says, and her voice, though even, carries the particular careful quality of someone who is holding a great deal of attention in a very small and precise place. "I know the road. But not well enough to ride blind. Not in complete darkness." "How far do you think we are from the gate?" Libby asks. "Perhaps half a kilometer. Perhaps a little less." A pause. "It might as well be 10, in this." Khaled, behind them on the road, has also stopped his cart. He does not say anything, but the silence he offers is the thoughtful silence of a man who has been on this road many times and knows that darkness like this, on a hill path with unlighted edges, is not something to be hurried through. They stand still for a moment, all three of them, the camels patient and unhurried beneath their riders, and the darkness presses gently in from all sides, and none of them can see more than a meter beyond the lantern's reach. Then Libby notices something. At first she thinks it is her eyes adjusting, finding shapes in the dark where there are none, the mind's old habit of reaching for pattern when the eyes cannot find it. But then it happens again. A brief, small pulse of light, low to the ground, a little ahead and to the left of the path. Then another, slightly further along. Then two more, further still, in the general direction of where the Caravanserai wall should be. "Charrie," she says softly. "I see them. Fireflies. In the desert, in a place where no one would expect to find them, where the conditions are all wrong for them, too dry and too stony and too far from the standing water they prefer, they are appearing. Not one or two, the kind of solitary wanderers you sometimes find far from their usual territory. Many. Dozens. Then hundreds. They rise from the rocks at the path's edge, from the sparse tufts of grass, from the crevices in the ancient fitted stones of the road itself, each one pulsing with its own cool, steady light, not amber, not warm, but a pale and luminous green-white, the color of something between moonlight and the heart of a flame. Each pulse lasts perhaps a second, then dims, then rises again, and with so many of them burning and dimming in their slightly offset rhythms, the effect is of a breathing, a slow, collective breathing of light in the dark, the desert itself gently inhaling and exhaling in luminescence. They are not scattered randomly across the hillside. They are gathered along the path. Along both edges of the ancient stone road, in an unbroken procession from where Libby and Charrie and Khaled now stand all the way up the hill and around the final bend and, presumably, to the Caravanserai gate itself, the fireflies are burning. They line the road the way lanterns would line it for a festival procession. They define its edges in soft, pulsing, living light. They make the invisible visible. They make the unknowable known. No one speaks for a moment, because there are no words that are the right size for this. Charrie, who is navigated by stars and maps and the knowledge in her bones and the memory of 1,000 roads, has never been guided quite like this, by light that lives and breathes and offers itself freely from the edges of the way ahead, asking nothing, simply showing where the path is. She finds that her hands, which had tightened slightly on the reins when the dark closed in, are now loose again. The tightness is gone. The anxiety of the unlighted path is gone. There is, instead, something so extraordinary and so unexpected that it produces not excitement but a kind of profound calm, the calm of a moment that has stepped outside the ordinary, that has made an unrepeatable gift of itself to 3 travelers who happen to be on this road on this night in this dark. She urges her camel forward, gently. The camel steps into the firefly corridor without hesitation. Animals, it seems, have no ambivalence about walking into a river of living light. It moves forward at the same steady pace as before, its footfalls quiet on the ancient stone, the fireflies pulsing and drifting on both sides of it, some of them rising as it passes, lifted on the warm current of the animal's movement, spiraling upward in brief, bright arcs before drifting back down. Libby follows, her camel settling into the gentle rhythm of the ascent, and Libby herself riding with her hands loose on the reins and her face turned slightly to one side to watch the fireflies nearest her, watching a single one as it pulses, dims, pauses in the momentary dark, then pulses again. Each individual firefly is a small, self-contained act of illumination. It carries its own light, makes its own decision about when to shine, and asks for nothing in return. Khalid comes last, his cart rolling quietly on the smooth stone, its repair wheel steady. He has not said a word since the fireflies appeared. He is an old man who has traveled this road twice a year for 20 years, and he has never seen anything like this. He suspects he will spend the rest of his life trying to describe it to people who weren't here, and that the description will always fall short, and that this is fine, that some things are meant to be experienced rather than conveyed, and that the inability to fully convey them is not a failure of language but a measure of the thing itself. They ride through the firefly corridor in silence. The path curves to the right, and the fireflies follow the curve perfectly, their living light marking the road around the bend with the same patient luminescence. And then, as they round the turn, the Caravanserai gate appears. Set into the arch on both sides are oil lamps and iron brackets, small, steady flames. And the jasmine begins here, climbing the stone wall just before the gate, its perfume arriving like a gentle announcement. You are here, you have arrived, the journey is done. The white flowers are invisible in the dark, but their fragrance is total, warm, enveloping, the smell of something that blooms fully and freely in the dark because the dark has never frightened it. At the gate, the fireflies then and then are gone, as though their task is complete, as though they were only ever needed for the last half-kilometer of uncertainty, as though the road asked something of them and they answered, and now they have dispersed back into whatever extraordinary night they came from. Libby looks back one last time. The hill is dark again. The fireflies are gone, or going, a few last pulses, scattered and dim, in the rocks below. The cloud cover is beginning to break on the northern edge, and the first stars are reappearing, and the darkness is no longer quite so absolute, and the night is becoming, again, the friendly and familiar thing it had been all evening. I hope they are still there when we leave in the morning, Libby says. I think, Charrie says, that they will not be. I think they were only ever for tonight. And she says it not with sadness but with the particular quality of acceptance that comes from understanding that some gifts are given once, and that this is part of what makes them gifts. The inner courtyard of the Caravanserai is a world complete in itself. It is large, perhaps 40 meters across, square in layout but softened by the things that have grown here over the years, the jasmine, which continues its climb along the inner walls as well, several small trees of the pomegranate variety, their branches spread at the comfortable height of lamplight, planters along the walkways containing low herbs whose names Libby is already beginning to catalog, mint, she can smell it, and something that might be lemon balm, and the sweet dusty scent of dried chamomile still hanging in the air from a bundle hung near the main archway. At the center of the courtyard is the fountain. It is not large or showy, a simple circular basin of pale stone, perhaps 3 meters across, raised a half-meter from the courtyard level, the water entering from a small brass spout and leaving through an unseen drain at the bottom, maintaining a constant low level that never rises and never falls. The sound it makes is precisely the sound of the Oasis pool in miniature, a gentle, continuous whisper, a soft conversation between water and stone that has been going on in this courtyard since the day the fountain was laid. The Caravanserai is not empty at this hour. Several small fires and lanterns are lit in various corners of the courtyard, and around them sit other travelers in various stages of the evening, some eating, some talking in low voices, some already wrapped in their traveling blankets and angled towards sleep. There is the specific, layered smell of a place where many different people have recently cooked and eaten and rested, wood smoke and spice and the smell of warm bread from somewhere nearby and, underneath it all, that particular clean smell of stone that has been standing in the open air for a very long time and has absorbed everything and given it all back in a single, complex, deeply comfortable fragrance. This is the smell of shelter. Of a place built for the specific and dignified purpose of giving weary travelers rest. Khaled guides his cart to the stable area on the left side of the courtyard, where a sleepy but attentive stableman takes charge of it. Libby and Charrie lead their camels to the same stable yard, where there is fresh feed waiting, fragrant hay and a measure of grain in shallow stone troughs, and clean water in a long basin fed by a secondary channel from the Caravanserai spring. The camels lower their great heads to the feed with the quiet enthusiasm of animals who have earned their supper, and Libby lingers a moment beside her camel, running her hand along the long curve of its neck, feeling the warmth of it, the solidity, the deep and patient aliveness of this animal that has carried her all this long desert night without complaint or resistance. She reaches into her satchel and finds what she has been saving since she packed it 2 days ago, 2 small rounds of pressed date and grain cake, sweet and dense, the kind of treat that camels adore with an enthusiasm quite disproportionate to the size of the thing. She offers one to her own camel first. The animal takes it from her palm with the delicate precision that large animals have when they are being careful with someone they trust, its soft lips barely grazing her skin, and then offers the second to Charrie's camel, which receives it with equal pleasure and nudges her shoulder gently afterwards, as if asking whether there might be more. "That's all," Libby tells it, smiling, and the camel regards her with those enormous, long-lashed eyes and then returns its attention to the hay with the philosophical acceptance of a creature that knows when a good situation has reached its natural limit. Charrie watches this from a step away. "You've been saving those since Samarkand," she says. "I told you they would earn them." Charrie shakes her head, but her expression is fond. She gives her own camel a long, slow stroke from the base of its neck to its shoulder, and the camel leans into her hand the way the fox had leaned into Libby's earlier that night, the same gesture, across a different scale, the same wordless acknowledgement of something offered and received. Libby and Charrie stand together in the center of the courtyard, beside the fountain, and look around. They have been traveling toward this place for 3 days. They have talked about it, imagined it, described it to each other based on the various accounts they have heard from travelers who have stayed here before. And now they are here, standing beside the fountain in the lamplight, and the place is exactly and precisely what it was described to be, and this particular experience, of a destination matching its reputation, of an anticipated thing being as good as you hoped, is one of the simple, reliable pleasures of a life spent traveling. "Well," Charrie says. "Well," Libby agrees. The keeper, Miriam, finds them before they have taken more than a few steps toward the main building. She is older than Libby imagined, not a small figure, as she had somehow pictured, but a tall woman, still straight-backed, with white hair worn in a long braid down her back and a face that is entirely and unconditionally the face of someone who knows exactly who she is and what she is for and is at complete peace with both facts. She is wearing a robe of deep burgundy and carries a ring of keys at her belt that chinks softly with every step. "New travelers," she says, looking them over with a gaze that is both friendly and extremely thorough. "How many nights?" "2, if that is possible," Charrie says. "It is possible. The east rooms are available, 2 adjacent rooms, both with window views onto the herb garden on the hillside. Good morning light, quiet. I think those are the right rooms for you." She says this with a pleasant certainty, not asking whether they want window views and quiet, simply observing that this is what they need, and in this she is exactly right. She leads them through the courtyard and up an exterior staircase to the upper walkway that runs along the inner walls of the Caravanserai, from which the rooms open. The staircase is worn in the center of each step, worn by countless travelers' feet across countless years, and the stone of the balustrade is smooth from the touch of countless hands that have rested on it as people climb these stairs at the end of long journeys. Miriam opens the first room. It is not large. It does not need to be. There is a wide, low sleeping platform built into the wall, covered with a mat of woven reed and a padding of cotton batting covered in clean cotton cloth. The room smells of the same dried herbs, chamomile, lavender, something slightly resinous, that Libby noticed below, deliberate touches that ensure the room itself promotes rest. A small window in the exterior wall looks out onto the hillside herb garden, just as Miriam said, and through it comes the cool, fresh air of the desert night, carrying the smell of sage and the very faintest trace of the jasmine from the courtyard below. On the sleeping platform, folded at the foot, are the blankets. They are silk. Of course, They are silk. This is a way station on the Silk Road, and the trade that flows through it flows both ways, and over the centuries the keeper has acquired the finest examples of everything that passes through her courtyard. But these blankets are not just silk, they are silk that has been weighted. This is an old practice in the high-altitude trade routes. The blankets are made with a subtle heaviness woven into them, achieved through the use of a particularly dense weave and a slight addition of mineral-treated thread that adds weight without adding stiffness. The result is a blanket that, when laid over a resting person, provides the same gentle, even pressure that hands might provide, a steady, calm weight that the nervous system interprets as safe containment. Libby recognizes what they are immediately. She reaches out and touches one, running her fingertips across the surface. "Charrie," she says softly. "You need to feel this." Charrie comes to stand beside her and touches the silk blanket. Her face, which habitually holds a kind of alert, forward-looking focus, softens. "The weave," she says. "I know this pattern. It is called cloud breath. It is from the weavers of Khotan, the old school. Not many people still know how to do it. My teacher showed me once, as a kind of history lesson rather than a practical instruction. I never thought I would actually feel it under my hands." "Rest now," Miriam says from the doorway, with the quiet authority of someone who has been looking at tired travelers for 40 years and knows when they have arrived at the precise limit of their useful wakefulness. There's water in the jar by the window, and honey in the small pot beside it, just a spoonful before sleep helps the body settle. Breakfast is in the courtyard from first light, but there is no obligation to rise early. Rest as long as you need. She pauses. "You have had a full night." This last observation is said with the faintest suggestion of a smile, not probing, not intrusive, just the acknowledgement of someone who can read the evidence of a night well traveled in the quiet glow that surrounds the two women. "Yes," Libby says. "We have." Miriam leaves. The door closes softly. And now the room is quiet. Libby opens the window a little wider, just a centimeter more, just enough to increase the flow of the cool night air across the room. Then she sits on the sleeping platform and removes her traveling boots, setting them beside the door with her satchel, which she unclips from her shoulder and places gently on the floor, the small clay jar and the bundles of herbs and the various instruments of her trade resting safely inside it. She takes a small spoonful of the honey from the pot by the window. It is dark amber honey, desert honey, made by bees that forage on the same desert sage and wild lavender and desert flowers that she carries in her satchel. The bees' harvest of this same landscape, concentrated into sweetness, offering the body a distillation of everything that grows here, everything that is strong and adapted and quietly alive in this ancient place. The sweetness spreads across her tongue, slowly. From the room next to hers, Charrie's room, the adjacent one, she can hear, very faintly through the shared wall, the sounds of her friend settling in, the soft thud of boots removed, the brief rustle of fabric, the almost inaudible sound of water poured from a jar. Familiar sounds. The sounds of a person she has known for 30 years at the end of a day, making themselves comfortable, doing the small private housekeeping of rest. There is something deeply comforting about this, the knowledge that someone you love is on the other side of the wall, also at rest, also safe. That you are not alone in the night even as you prepare to surrender to the solitude of sleep. Libby lies down. She reaches for the weighted silk blanket and draws it over herself. The weight of it is immediate and unmistakable. It settles over her not like a blanket, exactly, not quite. Like the quality of a rest that is about to become sleep. Like the body's own weight made external and gentle, pressed back against her with even, distributed steadiness. It touches her shoulders and her chest and her arms and her legs with the same quality of presence, and something in her that had been quietly, unconsciously braced against the openness of the world releases its last tension and simply gives in. The silk surface against her face is cool at first, then warm, matching her temperature within moments, becoming indistinguishable from her own body heat, so that the boundary between herself and the blanket is no longer clearly defined and she is simply warm, simply enclosed, simply held. The window draws the cool night air across the room in the softest of currents, barely a movement, barely a temperature difference, just the finest exchange of air, carrying the smell of sage and jasmine and the mineral clean of desert stone. From far below, muffled by the walls and the distance and the quality of the night, the sound of the courtyard fountain reaches her. That steady, gentle whisper of water on stone. It has been going on all day, all year, for decades upon decades in this courtyard, uninterrupted, unattended, simply continuing. And now it is the last sound she is aware of before the other sounds, the distant conversation of other travelers in the courtyard far below, the wind moving through the pomegranate trees, the occasional brief sound of the jasmine vine moving against the stone wall in the nighttime current of air. All of it distant. All of it quiet. All of it, in this moment, exactly what the world sounds like when nothing is wrong. You are here with her, in your own room, under your own weighted silk blanket, and the window is open just enough, and the honey is sweet on your tongue, and the sounds of the Caravanserai are all around you like a gentle enclosure of human warmth in the vast desert night. Let your body be heavy now. All of it. From the very top of your head down to your toes. Every part of you heavy, settled, released into the softness beneath you. Your head is heavy. Your neck is long and released. Your shoulders are wide and settled and low. Your chest is soft. Your breathing is slow and even. Each breath in, a gentle expansion. Each breath out, a complete release. Your hands are open. Your fingers are loose. There is nothing to hold. Your hips are relaxed. Your legs are long and heavy and still. Your feet are warm under the silk blanket. The night is large around you, but you are held within it. The desert stretches in every direction, the dunes and the rocks and the valley and the ancient road, and somewhere out in the dark, a small silver fox moving through the night towards something familiar and good, and somewhere on the hillside below the gate, a last few fireflies pulsing their quiet light in the dark for no one but themselves, and the stars are overhead, the same stars that the Oasis pool reflected. The same stars that Charrie has been naming and navigating by for 30 years. Of friendship, the same stars that travelers on this road have looked up at for 1,000 years. And you are here, inside all of that, inside the jasmine-scented walls of this ancient way station, inside the weight of a silk blanket that has been waiting here for you, inside the warmth of a night that is nothing but kind, inside the breath that comes without effort, inside the rest that you have been riding toward all evening and have now, finally, completely and irrevocably, arrived at. Libby's eyes are closed. She is thinking of the fox, or rather, she is not exactly thinking of the fox, because thinking requires more effort than she has left, but the fox is present in some way, in the way that good things are present in the mind just before sleep, not sharp and detailed, but luminous, a feeling memory rather than a visual one. The warmth of the small body against her palm. The softness of the fox's breathing as it settled. The moment it rose and looked at her before disappearing into the dark and whatever home was waiting for it there. She is thinking of the tea, of the 3-sip method and the cardamom and the way the warmth of the cup traveled from her hands up through her arms to her chest. Of Khaled's face in the firelight, that expression of pure, uncomplicated gladness at being in a good place with good company. She is thinking of the Oasis pool, of lying on that flat stone and watching the Milky Way in the water below and the Milky Way in the sky above and feeling, for those still minutes, as though she were not moving through space but floating in it, as though the ground and the sky were both equally close and equally far and equally gentle. She is thinking of the fireflies. Of riding through a corridor of living light in the middle of complete darkness, a gift that the night made without being asked, a kindness from the world that asked nothing in return and expected no acknowledgement and will probably never happen again. And now these thoughts are dissolving. Not disappearing exactly, dissolving, the way the rock sugar in the tea dissolved, gradually, into something that doesn't have an edge anymore, that is fully part of the thing it is mixed with. The thoughts are dissolving into the quality of the night, into the weight of the blanket, into the sound of the fountain below, into the slow rhythm of the breath. There is a moment, this exact moment, when waking life releases its grip and something else, something older and quieter and wiser than the waking mind, takes over. It does not announce itself. It does not require a decision. It simply happens, the way the sky darkened after the sun went down, gradually, naturally, without force, the light giving way to something deeper and more complete. You are in that moment. The Caravanserai is quiet now. The last conversations in the courtyard have stilled. The fires have burned low. The fountain whispers on, its steady gentle voice the only sound that does not sleep, the only thing still speaking in the language of water to the language of stone in the deep quiet of this ancient valley night. Somewhere on the hillside, the herb garden breathes out its nighttime fragrance, sage and lavender and chamomile and the clean, cool smell of mountain air descending through the valley as it does each night, bringing the coolness of the high places down to the valley floor, a gentle, regular exchange between altitude and warmth, between the sky and the earth. The jasmine is still blooming. In the dark, unseen, the white flowers continue their slow opening, their silent offering of perfume to the night air, unconcerned with whether anyone is awake to receive it. This is the jasmine's nature, to offer completely, without calculation, without expectation of recognition, without any requirement that someone be present to appreciate the gift. The fragrance exists whether or not anyone breathes it in. You are breathing it in. Sleep now. Let the night hold you. Let the desert be large and kind and full of stars around you. Let Libby and Charrie in the old road and the silver fox in the oasis pool and the taste of cardamom tea and the fireflies in the dark and the weight of the silk blanket become simply the texture of a night that was good, a night that had everything in it that a night needs to have, and that is now, completely and peacefully, done. The stars are keeping watch. The fountain sings its soft, unchanged song. Sleep,